First Maccabees Chapter 11. Alliance of Ptolemy and Demetrius II. Then the king of Egypt gathered forces as numerous as the sands of the seashore and many ships, and he sought by deceit to take Alexander's kingdom and add it to his own. He set out for Syria with peaceful words, and the people in the cities opened their gates to welcome him, as King Alexander had ordered them to do, since Ptolemy was his father-in-law. But when Ptolemy entered the cities, he stationed a garrison of troops in each one. As they heard Azotus, they showed him the temple of Dagon, destroyed by fire. Azotus and its suburbs demolished, corpses lying about, and the charred bodies of those burned in the war. For they had heaped them up along his route. They told the king what Jonathan had done in order to denigrate him. But the king said nothing. Jonathan met the king with pomp at Joppa, and they greeted each other and spent the night there. Jonathan accompanied the king as far as the river called Eleutherus, and then returned to Jerusalem. And so King Ptolemy took possession of the cities along the seacoast as far as Seleucia by the sea, plotting evil schemes against Alexander all the while. He sent ambassadors to King Demetrius, saying, "Come, let us make a covenant with each other. I will give you my daughter whom Alexander has married, and you shall reign over your father's kingdom. I regret that I gave him my daughter, for he has sought to kill me." He was criticizing Alexander, however, because he coveted his kingdom. After taking his daughter away, Ptolemy gave her to Demetrius and broke with Alexander. The enmity between them was now evident. Then Ptolemy entered Antioch and assumed the crown of Asia. Thus he set upon his head two crowns, that of Egypt and that of Asia. Now King Alexander was in Cilicia at that time, because the people of that region had revolted. When Alexander heard the news, he came against Ptolemy in battle. Ptolemy marched out and met him with a strong force and routed him. When Alexander fled to Arabia to seek protection, King Ptolemy was triumphant. Zabdiel, the Arabian, cut off Alexander's head and sent it to Ptolemy. But 3 days later, King Ptolemy himself died, and his troops in the strongholds were killed by the inhabitants of the strongholds. Thus, Demetrius became king in the 167th year. Alliance of Jonathan and Demetrius II. In those days, Jonathan gathered together the people of Judea to attack the citadel in Jerusalem, and they set up many siege engines against it. But some transgressors of the law, enemies of their own nation, went to the king and informed him that Jonathan was besieging the citadel. When Demetrius heard this, he was enraged, and as soon as he heard it, he set out and came to Ptolemais. He wrote to Jonathan to discontinue the siege and to meet him for a conference at Ptolemais as soon as possible. On hearing this, Jonathan ordered the siege to continue. He selected some elders and priests of Israel and put himself at risk. Taking with him silver, gold, and apparel, and many other presents, he went to the king at Ptolemais and found favor with him. Although certain renegades of his own nation kept on bringing charges against him, the king treated him just as his predecessors had done, and exalted him in the presence of all of his friends. He confirmed him in the high priesthood and in the other honors he had previously held, and had him enrolled among his chief friends. Jonathan asked the king to exempt Judea and the 3 districts of Samaria from tribute, promising him in return 300 talents. The king agreed and wrote a letter to Jonathan about all these matters as follows. King Demetrius sends greetings to his brother Jonathan and to the Jewish nation. We are sending you for your information a copy of the letter that we wrote to Lasthenes, our kinsman, concerning you. King Demetrius sends greetings to his father, Lasthenes, upon the Jewish nation who are our friends and observe their obligations to us. We have decided to bestow benefits because of the good will they show us. Therefore, we confirm their possession not only of the territory of Judea, but also of the 3 districts of Ephraim, Lydda, and Ramathaim. These districts, together with all of their descendancies, are hereby transferred from Samaria to Judea for those who offer sacrifices in Jerusalem in lieu of the royal taxes the king used to receive yearly from the produce of earth and trees. From payment of the other things that would henceforth be due to us, namely the tithes and taxes, As all of these we grant them release. Henceforth and forever, not one of these provisions shall ever be revoked. See to it, therefore, that a copy of these instructions be made and given to Jonathan. Let it be displayed on the holy mountain in a conspicuous place. The intrigue of Trypho. When King Demetrius saw that the land was peaceful under his rule and that he had no opposition, he dismissed his entire army, each to his own home, except the foreign troops which he had hired from the islands of the nations. So all the soldiers who had served under his predecessors became hostile to him. When a certain Trypho, who had previously supported Alexander, saw that all the troops were grumbling about Demetrius, he went to Amilcu, the Arabian, who was raising Alexander's son, Antiochus. Trypho kept urging Amilcu to hand over the boy to him so that he might succeed his father as king. He told him all that Demetrius had done and of the hostility his soldiers had for him, and he remained there for many days. Jonathan aids Demetrius II. Meanwhile, Jonathan sent the request to King Demetrius to withdraw the troops in the citadel from Jerusalem and from the other strongholds, for they were constantly waging war on Israel. Demetrius in turn sent this word to Jonathan: I will do not only this for you and your nation, but I will greatly honor you and your nation when I find the opportunity. Now therefore you will do well to send men to fight for me, because all of my troops have revolted. So Jonathan sent 3,000 good fighting men to him at Antioch. When they came to the king, he was delighted over their arrival. The populace, 120,000 strong, missed in the center of the city in an attempt to kill the king. So the king took refuge in the palace, while the populace gained control of the main streets of the city and prepared for battle. Then the king called the Jewish force to his aid. They all rallied around him and spread out through the city. On that day they killed about 100,000 in the city, and at the same time they set the city on fire and took much spoil. Thus they saved the king. When the populace saw that the Jewish force controlled the city, they lost courage and cried out to the king in supplication, Extend the hand of friendship to us and make the Jews stop attacking us and the city. So they threw down their weapons and made peace. The Jews thus gained honor in the eyes of the king and all of his subjects, and they became renowned throughout his kingdom. Finally they returned to Jerusalem with much plunder. But when King Demetrius was sure of his royal throne and the land was peaceful under his rule, he broke all of his promises and became estranged from Jonathan. Instead of repaying Jonathan for all of the favors he had received from him, he caused him much distress. Alliance of Jonathan and Antiochus the fourth. After this, Trypho returned and brought with him the young boy Antiochus, who had become king and put on the diadem. All the soldiers whom Demetrius had discharged rallied against Antiochus and fought against Demetrius, who had routed and fled. Trypho captured the elephants and occupied Antiochus. Then young Antiochus wrote to Jonathan, I confirm you in the high priesthood and appoint you ruler over the 4 districts and to be one of the king's friends. He also sent him gold dishes and a table service, gave him the right to drink from gold cups, to dress in royal purple, and to wear a gold buckle. Likewise, he made Jonathan's brother Simon governor of the region from the ladder of Tyre to the borders of Egypt. Campaigns of Jonathan and Simon. Jonathan set out and traveled through the province of the west of Euphrates and its cities, and all the forces of Syria espoused his cause as allies. When he arrived at Ascalon, the citizens welcomed him with pomp. But when he set out for Gaza, the people of Gaza shut him out, so he besieged it and burned and plundered its suburbs. Then the people of Gaza appealed to Jonathan, and he granted them terms of peace. He took the sons of the leaders and hostages and sent them to Jerusalem. He then traveled on through the province as far as Damascus. Jonathan heard that the generals of Demetrius had come with a strong force to Kadesh in Galilee, intending to remove him from office, so he went to meet them, leaving his brother Simon in the province. Simon encamped against Bethzur, attacked it for many days, and shut in the inhabitants. They appealed to him, and he granted them terms of peace, and he expelled them from the city, took possession of it, and put a garrison there. Meanwhile, Jonathan and his army pitched their camp near the waters of Gennesaret, and at daybreak they went to the plain of Hazor. There, the army of the foreigners met him on the plain, having first detached an ambush in the mountains. This army mounted a frontal attack. Then those in ambush rose out of their places and joined in the battle All of Jonathan's men fled. No one stayed except the army's commanders, Mattathias, son of Absalom, and Judas, son of Calphi. Jonathan tore his clothes, threw dust on his head, and prayed. Then he went back to the battle and routed them, and they fled. Those of his men who were running away saw it and returned to him, and with him they pursued the enemy as far as the camp in Kadesh, and there they encamped. About 3,000 of the foreign troops fell on that day. Then Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. 1 Maccabees Chapter 12, Alliances with Rome and Sparta. When Jonathan saw that the time was right, he chose men and sent them to Rome to confirm and renew the friendship with the Romans. He also sent letters to the Spartans and other places to the same effect. After reaching Rome, the men entered the Senate chamber and said, "The high priest Jonathan and the Jewish people have sent us to renew the friendship and alliance of earlier times with them." The Romans gave them letters addressed to authorities in various places with the request to provide them with safe conduct in the land of Judah. This is a copy of the letter that Jonathan wrote to the Spartans. Jonathan, the high priest, the senate of the nation, the priests, and the rest of the Jewish people send greetings to their brothers, the Spartans. Long ago, a letter was sent to the high priest Onias from Arius, who then reigned over you, stating that you are our brothers, as the attached copy shows. Onias welcomed the envoy with honor and received the letter, which spoke clearly of alliance and friendship. Though we have no need of these things, since we have for our encouragement the holy books that are in our possession, we have ventured to send word to you for the renewal of brotherhood and friendship. Lest we become strangers to you, a long time has passed since you sent your message to us. We, on our part, have unceasingly remembered you in the sacrifices and prayers that we offer on our feasts and other appropriate days. As it is right, proper to remember brothers, we likewise rejoice in your renown. But many tribulations and many wars have beset us, and the kings around us have attacked us. We do not wish to be troublesome to you and the rest of your allies and friends in these wars, for we have the help of heaven for our support, and we have been saved from our enemies, and our enemies have been humbled. So we have chosen Nemenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, and we have sent them to the Romans to renew with them the friendship and the alliance of earlier times. We have also ordered them to come to you and greet you, and to deliver to you our letter concerning the renewal of our brotherhood. Therefore kindly send us an answer of this matter. This is a copy of the letter that they sent to Onias. Arius, king of the Spartans, sends greetings to Onias, the high priest. A document has been found stating that the Spartans and the Jews are brothers, and that they are of the family of Abraham. Now that we have learned this, kindly write to us about your welfare. We, for our part, declare to you that your animals and your possessions are ours, and ours are yours. We have therefore given orders that you should be told of this. More campaigns of Jonathan and Simon. Then Jonathan heard that the officers of Demetrius had returned to attack him with a stronger army than before. So he set out from Jerusalem and met them in the territory of Hamath. Giving them no opportunity to enter his province, the spies he had sent into their camp came back and reported to him that the enemy was preparing to attack them that night. Therefore, when the sun set, Jonathan ordered his men to keep watch with their weapons at the ready for battle throughout the night, and he set outposts around the camp. When the enemy heard that Jonathan and his men were ready for battle, their hearts sank with fear and dread. They lighted fires in their camp and then withdrew. But because Jonathan and his men were watching the campfires burning, they did not know until the morning what had happened. Then Jonathan pursued them, but he could not overtake them, for they had crossed the river Eleutherus. So Jonathan turned aside against the Arabians, who are called Zabadeans, and he struck them down and plundered them. Then he broke camp, marched on toward Damascus, and traveled through the whole region. Simon also set out and traveled as far as Ascalon and its neighboring strongholds. He then turned to Joppa and took it by surprise, for he heard that its people intended to hand over the stronghold to the supporters of Demetrius. He left a garrison there to guard it. When Jonathan returned, he assembled the elders of the people, and with them he made plans for building strongholds in Judea, for making the walls of Jerusalem still higher, and for erecting a high barrier between the citadel and the city to separate it from the city and isolate it, so that its garrison could neither buy nor sell. The people therefore gathered together to build up the city, for part of the wall of the eastern valley had collapsed, and Jonathan repaired the quarter called Shaphanatha. Simon likewise built up Adidah in the Shephelah and fortified it by installing gates and bars. Capture of Jonathan. Then Trypho sought to become king of Asia, assume the diadem, and do violence to King Antiochus. But he was afraid that Jonathan would not permit him, but would fight against him, looking for a way to seize and kill him. He set out and came to Bethshan. Jonathan marched out to meet him with 40,000 picked fighting men, and saw that Jonathan had arrived with a large army. He was afraid to do him violence. Instead, he received him with honor, introduced him to all of his friends, and gave him presents. He also ordered his friends and soldiers to obey him as that they would himself. Then he said to Jonathan, "Why have you put all these people to so much trouble, when we are not even at war? Now pick out a few men to stay with you, send the rest to their homes, and then come with me to Ptolemais. I will hand it over to you, together with other strongholds and the remaining troops, as well as all the officials. Then I will turn back and go home. That is why I came here." Jonathan trusted him and did as he said. He dismissed his troops, and they returned to the land of Judah. But he kept with him 3,000 men, of whom he left 2,000 in Galilee, while 1,000 accompanied him. Then, as soon as Jonathan entered Ptolemais, the people of Ptolemais closed the gates and seized him. All who had entered with him they killed with the sword. Then Trypho sent soldiers and cavalry to Galilee and the great plain to destroy all of Jonathan's men. These, upon learning that Jonathan had been captured and killed along with his companions, encouraged one another and went out in close formation, ready to fight. As their pursuers saw that they were ready to fight for their lives, they turned back. Thus all Jonathan's men came safely into the land of Judah. They mourned Jonathan and those who were with him. They were in great fear, and all of Israel fell into deep mourning. All of the nations round about sought to crush them. They said, "Now that they have no leader or helper, let us make war on them and wipe out their memory from the earth." IV leadership of Simon. Chapter 13. Simon as leader. When Simon heard that Trypho was gathering a large army to invade and ravage the land of Judah, and saw that the people were trembling with terror, he went up to Jerusalem. There he assembled the people and exhorted them in these words: "You know what I, my brothers, my father's house have done for the laws in the sanctuary, what battles and hardships we have seen. For the sake of this, for the sake of Israel, all of my brothers have perished, and I alone am left. Far be it from me, then, to save my own life in any time of distress, for I am not better than my brothers. But I will avenge my nation and the sanctuary, as well as your wives and children, for out of hatred all of the Gentiles have united to crush us." As the people heard these words, their spirit was rekindled. They shouted in reply, "You are our leader. In place of your brothers Judas and Jonathan, fight our battles, and we will do everything that you tell us." So Simon mustered all of the men able to fight, and hastening to complete the walls of Jerusalem, fortified it on every side. He sent Jonathan, son of Absalom, to Joppa with a strong force. Jonathan drove out the occupants and remained there. Trypho's deceit. Then Trypho moved from Ptolemais with a large army to invade the land of Judah, bringing Jonathan with him as prisoner. Simon encamped at Adidah, facing the plain. When Trypho learned that Simon had succeeded his brother Jonathan and that he intended to fight him, he sent ambassadors to him with this message: "It was on account of the money your brother Jonathan owed the royal treasury in connection with the offices that it held that we have detained him. Now send 100 talents of silver and 2 of his sons as hostages, to guarantee that when he is set free he will not revolt against us, and we will release him." Simon knew that they were speaking deceitfully to him. Nevertheless, for fear of provoking much hostility among the people, he sent for the money and the boys, lest the people say, "Jonathan perished because I would not send Trypho the money and the boys." So he sent the boys and the 100 talents, but Trypho broke his promise and would not release Jonathan. Next, Trypho moved to invade and ravage the country. His troops went around by the road that leads to Edora, but Simon and his army moved along opposite him everywhere he went. The people in the citadel kept sending emissaries to Trypho, pressing him to come to them by way of the wilderness and to send them provisions. Although Trypho got all of his cavalry ready to go, there was a very heavy snowfall that night, and he could not go on account of the snow, so he left for Gilead. When he was approaching Bascama, he had Jonathan killed and buried him there. Then Trypho returned to his own land. Jonathan's tomb. Simon sent for the remains of his brother Jonathan and buried him in Modian, the city of his ancestors. All of Israel bewailed him with solemn lamentation, mourning him for many days. Then Simon erected over the tomb of his father and his brothers a monument of stones polished front and back, and raised him enough to be seen at a distance. He set up 7 pyramids facing one another for his father and his mother and his 4 brothers. For the pyramids he devised a setting of massive columns, which he adorned with suits of armor as a perpetual memorial, and next to the armor-carved ships, which could be seen by all who sailed the sea. This tomb, which he built at Modian, is there to the present day. Alliance of Simon and Demetrius II. Tryphon dealt treacherously with the young king Antiochus. He killed him and became king in his place, putting on the crown of Asia. Thus he brought much evil on the land. Simon, for his part, built up the strongholds of Judea, fortifying them all around with high towers, thick walls, and gates with bars, and he stored up provisions in the strongholds. Simon also chose men and sent them to King Demetrius to obtain for the land an exemption from taxation. Since Tryphon did nothing but plunder, King Demetrius replied favorably and sent him the following letter. King Demetrius sends greetings to Simon, high priest, and friend of the kings, and to the elders and the Jewish people. We have received the gold crown and palm branches that you sent. We are ready to make a lasting peace with you and to write to our officials to grant you exemption. Whatever decrees we have made in your regard remain in force, and the strongholds that you have built you may keep. We pardon any oversights and offenses committed up to now, as well as the crown tax that you owe. Any other tax that will be used to be collected in Jerusalem shall no longer be collected there. Any of you qualified for enrollment in our service may be enrolled. Let there be peace between us. Thus in the 170th year, the yoke of the Gentiles was removed from Israel. And the people began to write in their records and contracts in the first year of Simon, great high priest, governor, and leader of the Jews. Simon captures Getsara. In those days, Simon besieged Getsara and surrounded it with troops. He made a siege machine, brought it up against the city, and attacked and captured one of the towers. Those in the siege machine leaped down into the city, and a great tumult arose there. Those in the city, together with their wives and children, went up on the wall with their garments rent and cried out in loud voices, begging Simon to grant them terms of peace. They said, "Treat us not according to our evil deeds, but according to your mercy." So Simon came to terms with them and did not attack them. He expelled them from the city, however, and he purified the houses in which there were idols. Then he entered the city with hymns and songs of praise, after removing from it everything that was impure. He settled there people who observed the law. He improved its fortifications and built himself a residence. Simon captures the citadel. The people in the citadel in Jerusalem were prevented from going out into the country and back to buy or sell. They suffered greatly from hunger, and many of them died of starvation. They finally cried out to Simon, and he gave them terms of peace. He expelled them from the citadel and cleansed it of impurities. On the 23rd day of the 2nd month in the 171st year, the Jews entered the citadel with shouts of praise, the waving of palm branches, the playing of harps and cymbals and lyres, and the singing of hymns and canticles, because a great enemy of Israel had been crushed. Simon decreed that this day should be celebrated every year with rejoicing. He also strengthened the fortifications of the Temple Mount alongside the citadel, and he and his people dwelt there. Seeing that his son John was now a grown man, Simon made him commander of all of his soldiers, and he dwelt in Getsara. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. God bless you.